Hi, welcome to Memory Chips Podcast. I am Ann Wyszynski, and I have a collection of potato chip bags from around the world. And every so often, I go through this collection, and a certain bag or bags will bring up memories of people, places, ideas, and I really want to share these with you. So if you please subscribe, you will never miss a bag. Hello, Memory Chippers. Welcome to Italian meat flavor. That is the first flavor of the first bag that I collected in my potato chip bag collection. And who better to unpack this with than somebody who was there when I got it. So today I invited my dear friend, Dr. Jessica Kendall, but I call her she, which means west in Mandarin, and she calls me Nan, which means south. And we call each other those names because that was what our foot juggling teacher in China called us. In 2005, she was in a master's program at SOAS in London. And she came to China where myself and Orline Carlos and Carlos Gentile were all studying antipodism with the Hebei acrobatic troupe of China in Shijiazhuang. There was a reason why you came to China. What was it?
Yeah, when I had set up my research and was doing my proposals, I was thinking about looking at Chinese acrobats training in China and performing abroad without really knowing what was there on the ground in real life. And I had a month-long break, and I thought maybe this is a perfect opportunity to really see what's there.
At some point during Xi's stay, our teacher Li Laoshe decided to take us by train from Shijiazhuang to Wuqiao. It's about 4 hours, and it was in that empty, desolate train station in Wuqiao that I spotted the Italian meat flavor chips. And I really wanted to remember this feeling of discomfort of not knowing what was happening around me. So I saved the bag so I wouldn't forget that moment. And this was the start of my potato chip bag collection. When we were in Wuqiao together was the first time that you'd been to Wuqiao.
Yes.
And that was the first time that I'd been to Wuqiao. And, and do you remember or know what the purpose of our trip to Wuqiao was?
Is this a trick question? Like, I should just put this out there in the podcast. I've had 3 children since this has happened, so my memory is a bit demolished. I mean, I would kind of surmise, this isn't really based on any memory or direct recollection, that, you know, it's the home of acrobatics, and it was close, and that's where Carlo and Orline initially trained. And
I was looking at the Italian meat flavor potato chip photos, and then I was like, okay, what were we doing there? And then I realized the reason why we went there was because I had started studying and I needed to buy props.
Now I remember.
Yeah. And it was an excuse. It was an excuse to take you. I mean, I think it was all of those things, but I think that Carlo and Orline needed like new jars and props, and I needed umbrellas. And I think that we were making a trip to go shopping. And you wanted to see what was going on too. That's what I thought. Basically, because I just realized, like, the whole thing of not understanding what was going on ever. Also, it started there. Like, why are we on this train for 4 hours? What is going on?
I think that not understanding what is going on is like such a normal state of being for me that, like, it didn't even cause me to think what is going there. Of course.
I know. Well, I mean, that's why it's so impressive to me that you were doing ethnography, or you were, trying to do ethnography. It's like, what I think the goal of that is trying to understand what's going on.
In some way, but I actually think that if that's tight, trying to understand what's going on in a very tight way, it actually is really hard to do ethnography.
Right.
That in some way you have to be like a baby who is just open to everything.
Right.
And then see what's happening in the moment.
Did you get that picture that I sent you?
Yes, I just saw it. It was amazing.
Okay. So you don't remember that, do you?
No, I remember my coat, but that's it.
The black furry long coat.
The black rat coat. That was actually my mother's coat.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, do you still have it?
No.
Oh, it would be perfect for Montreal.
It would be, yeah. But I think I used it as a duvet when I first moved to the UK because I didn't want to spend $20 on a duvet there. So I was like, my coat is going to double. Yes. My checkered past.
Oh my gosh. So, so then, because I think what I'm remembering of that is the picture of me holding the bag of the Italian meat flavor and you looking at it. I think that was taken in the train station because there was like this empty shop there.
Yeah.
That like
I remember the feeling of that shop, that kind of like half empty, not really occupied.
Yeah. And there was it looked like it was a gift shop. It looked like there were like little trinkets and stuff in like display cases, but like the lights were off. But it could have been in the middle of the day when everyone was taking a nap, like nap time. And it's not always empty. And we just encountered it during an empty time. But somebody must have sold us. I don't think I stole those chips. So somebody must have sold them to us.
Yeah. I remember your enthusiasm for all the chips that were there. That I remember clearly.
Yeah. Well, that one, so that particular bag was really confusing. And I think I was confused the whole time that we were there. But the thing is, like on the way back, after we had seen the sights and done all the things, I was confused by the fact that it would be Italian meat flavor, that would be the flavor. And then traveling with Carlo Gentile, this Italian American guy. And it's like, here, Carlo, these are for you, Italian meat flavor. And then trying to guess, like, what do you think Italian meat flavor is? I think it was, I just remember it tasting like bouillon, like beef bouillon.
Yeah. You mean as opposed to being named another meat flavor, like
Chinese meat flavor?
I feel like culinary wise, there's like some kind of links between China and Italy. And I'm saying this based out of nothing other than noodles and pasta. And there's some kind of discussion about that I don't know much about. Right. So maybe there's a reference to that would be relevant for people.
Once a year for the clown festival, right? Isn't that when foreigners go to Wuqiao?
Yeah, I think it's a general circus festival, right?
Oh, I thought it was a clown. I thought it was
maybe I'm thinking of the Shijiazhuang one.
Oh, okay, yeah, maybe that. But so it's a circus festival. I guess there are foreigners that go there, but they don't. That that's the only concession to foreigners, like having an Italian meat flavor. That's because I don't remember it being especially hospitable to people that don't understand what's happening.
In terms of what?
Just tourist facilities. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
I mean, even it's not even hospitable for Chinese tourists, which I think that the Wuqiao acrobatics world, who knows if that's even a draw for Chinese tourists, but I think a little bit from what I've heard, a little bit. But let's talk about Wuqiao acrobatics world. So I think, I called it, so I wrote a blog post at the time that was called like the dingiest theme park in the world or something like that. I don't remember.
Something subtle like that.
Something subtle. Yeah. But it was like, it was such a surprise to have taken this train ride to 4 hours into the countryside and then show up at this train, like really barren train station, and then be taken to Wuqiao acrobatics world, I didn't have any idea what to expect there. So, okay.
But I imagine I did. I imagine.
Okay. So, well, I'll just give you a few of my memories and see if it triggers anything for you. But, so it was a walled like theme park full of people doing Chinese folk acrobatics. So there was like a guy walking up a ladder of knives, and then like doing some sort of swan thing with his stomach balancing on this thing of knives. And then there was a girl doing contortion. Do you remember this? It was a little girl. She was dressed in like a green and yellow polyester, like flouncy thing. And she was probably, I'd say 7 or 8. And she was doing contortion on the ground with no mat or anything. And then there was an old man sitting next to her smoking a cigarette. And he was wearing like some sort of weird Confucius hat and whatever. And I did not understand what were they trying? Was he just there? Was he her teacher and just sitting next to her? Or was that some sort of thing going on that was like an act that I didn't get? Like, do you remember that?
I remember this. I have photos of all of that part of the acrobatics world. I think it was just casual, it was just that casual. That's what it looks like. I think for sure, either a teacher, trainer, leader of some sort, sort of hovering and,
I like that you said that, because that's kind of like a representative of this idea of having a teacher hovering, which was our situation, which was this thing that made me feel safe, not knowing what was going on. Like, you know what I mean? Like he was there, he knew what was going on. We weren't able to communicate with him, but I mean, he was like a guide. So anyway, but
you found that like supportive, you found that sort of
what
protective element. Yeah.
I always felt like he had our best interests in mind. Don't you?
Yeah, I mean, for certain, yeah. I think when I went back there to do my research, it was the context was different, and what I wanted to be able to do was outside of just the scope of course, coming there and training. So then it was like, for me, it became kind of negotiating that relationship in a different kind of way.
Yeah. So you remember it, but you don't remember the walls with these weird statues in there?
Vaguely. Okay.
Because they were telling some sort of story of certain sages, and they were dioramas. They were life-size or bigger than life-size dioramas of paper mache things or fiberglass. I don't know if they're made of fiberglass or paper mache, but we couldn't go in there. They were like, you could just look in, and then there were little signs, but they were like in Chinese, talking about what they were. And then you just walk along those walls and they look into those little rooms, and they had the dioramas in there, and they had nothing to do with acrobatics. And that was another thing. I was so confused. I was like, are we in a different dimension? Like, did we go, when we got up on the walls, are we out of Chinese acrobatics world and there's like a new thing going on up here? Or like, that was super confusing.
Well, it's interesting. Like here, I have this vague recollection of that part of the structure. And it just, hearing what you're saying is making me think of, I was in Egypt, and we went to Alexandria, and we went inside this tomb, and inside this tomb, there was this overlap between hieroglyphics, Roman sort of aesthetic of burial, and Arabic language. And like looking at this kind of like congregation of these different cultural elements that one wouldn't necessarily think were going to come together,
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of like that, that it's easy to compartmentalize. This is acrobatics, this is that, but like really there's so much fluidity in what's happening. And so whatever kind of underlying maybe spiritual orientation or kind of folk religious orientation that might be present in Wuqiao is going to show up in ways that, may take a tourist or someone who's foreign back a little bit.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so I think it's funny that, here, like, we're kind of talking about how it's okay not to understand what's going on. It's okay to like let somebody just think, but at the same time, we're trying to explain it, like we're still trying to be like, I wonder what was, I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's in some way unavoidable, like with coming from a certain background, coming from a certain culture, coming from a certain academic instruction, that's what's going to be. But I mean, I think it's kind of different to make a distinction of this is how it is versus these are some observations, and we're being self-reflexive about it, knowing that it's just it's not the truth or the reality. It's just kind of like an interpretation of it. But I found when I was writing my thesis that most of my writing was ethnographic, because I felt like the storytelling element of it was like the most kind of evocative and effective way to touch on what that time and place was from my vantage point, versus trying to put a direct academic theory on it, because I mean, of course, like part and parcel to doing a PhD, you've got to engage with theory on some level. But I felt like to kind of evoke a certain kind of ambiance, or like what that kind of, because it's really interesting, right? This space where there's these, a smoking old man and a young girl in this neon costume, and then these dioramas. Like this is really, I mean, I felt like when I lived with the Sudanese group of acrobats who were there, and it was in an amusement park. And it was like being in a Fellini film. I mean, that's really what it felt like. It felt like the most like obscure way of living. And I think just to, like, for me, it's not really explanatory. It's more like storytelling. It's telling a story from a perspective, no judgments necessarily.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So good. So tell a story. Tell the story of when we went from the hotel. I think we were going were we going from the hotel or to the restaurant, or to a restaurant from the hotel?
I think there and maybe back. I mean, we were going across the street is where we were going. we were going across the street.
Yeah. Like it was a wide street, but how wide do you think it was? Maybe like
probably 30 feet and then like 20 feet down, but we didn't know we were going across the street. I mean, we thought we were going to this restaurant. The taxi was called. We get in the taxi, we start to go, and then we start to stop right across the street.
And that's where the restaurant was. I love how we called a taxi to drive across the street.
Yes.
That was so confusing. We're like, and I think we looked at each other and we're like, what?
But, I guess, we're all built differently. And well, remember that moment and many other moments in China with you guys that, with the not knowing, with the what is going on, with what, trusting someone else to kind of take the reins in that way, that to approach being in that position of not knowing with openness and humor, like there were so many funny things. And, it's, I've seen lots of people in travels, they get really resistant, they get really controlling, they get really freaked out, but I feel that the situation is the best and most difficult opportunity to go in that way and to practice those things. But I think it takes a lot of consciousness, and I think it takes, just a lot of willingness to be in a place of real uncomfortableness.
Mm-hmm. So when we got to that restaurant that was across the street, in the taxi, I had to use the bathroom. They pointed into like, there's a bathroom, and I opened up the door, and it was like just a room, like a closet with tiled closet, like windows and floors. And there was a yellow, I don't know why I remember it as yellow, but I remember it as being yellow. There was a yellow plastic bucket on the floor and a hose. And I was like, how am I supposed to do this? This is a basic function. And I'm like, I don't know how to ask how to use this. I don't know how to use. I don't know if I'm supposed, like, I didn't have to poo, luckily, but I had to pee. And I was like, okay, do I just pee in the bucket and leave it in there? Or do I What's the hose for? Do I dump it in some, like I was looking for a drain. I think there might've been a drain, but I remember like being in there and like a hose and a bucket. Like I have to pee. How do I do it? Like, how do I take?
This is like the makings of a strategy game.
I know.
Like a strategy board game.
So I think what I did was, I think I might have peed in the bucket and then dumped it in the drain and then hosed it out. I think that's what I did. What would you have done?
If I was just peeing, I would have peed in like over the drain and then hosed in the bucket and dumped the water over the drain. Kind of eliminate that middle step of pee going in there and there.
Okay. What would you have done if you had to? Would you have done if you had to poo?
If I had to poo, I would have pooped in the bucket, used the hose to wash my bum.
Okay.
And left it at that.
And then left it in there.
They're not really giving you an option, right? Like
no,
other than that.
No.
Yeah.
So then it's like things like that. It was like, wow, like I thought I knew how to go to the bathroom, but I guess I don't.
I love that. I honestly, not to say every time I go to the toilet, I would like to relearn in a new way how to go, but there's something so, it's just such a reminder, that like all this stuff that we think is normal is not normal.
No,
it's
exactly.
Totally particular, cultural, and it's something. It makes you wake up if you have to think about it. Like if you don't just kind of like, I was watching a documentary a while ago about Sudanese refugees that came to the US. And I remember watching one scene where they were taking Lucky Charms and putting them in a mortar and pestle and crushing them and then making porridge, and just the kind of like what would occur, and what does occur to me when I go to another place. And you know, the not knowing what's going on, relating to, like, in our case, a teacher kind of guiding you and taking you and putting you here and, taking care of you, and the beauty of that. And then also for me, a little bit of the frustration of that, like I wanted more not to know what was going on. That not knowing what was going on for me is the most rich place. And even in the creative process, it's all that. And it's the willingness to go in the dark and to trust yourself. And for me, Wuqiao was the freedom that I found there. It was because I was taking trips at first with a person who was going to select acrobats, but then by myself to see the groups of people. And for me, ultimately, I found that not knowing is the most, it's the richest, most prosperous way to live.
Yeah. Yeah. How do we stay in that mindset? You have to just keep it in mind. You have to remember, like, okay, the last time I let things go, the last time I did this was rewarding, and it will be this time, and.
Yeah. And I think too, especially in the times we are in right now, I think everything is opportunity for that, frankly, like for me, like if fear comes up or resistance to reality, for me, there's every opportunity in the not knowing of what's going to happen in the pandemic, and the not knowing of what's going to happen next week, next month, with all of the uncertainty that is been brought to the surface. Like that's like curriculum to me, and it's not as fancy and sexy as going to Wuqiao, although I never thought I'd say Wuqiao is sexy. Did you ever, throughout your time in China, getting these different chips, getting the different potato chips, was there something specific for you about Italian meat flavor and Wuqiao and that time? Like,
no. So basically the thing about the chips, like the is that I started collecting them as like memory aids. Like I actually, I collected them because I thought, like, I was like, there's something in here I'm trying to figure out, like that. And I never really figured it out. And like, the reason why I'm doing this is to try to unravel, like, what is the reason that I collected these bags? Truthfully, like, I pretty much don't remember where I collected any of these bags. Do you know what I mean? Like I look at them, like I have like 500 things and I can't tell you, like, oh, I got this here or this there. It's like, I can tell what country they're from, So the Italian meat flavor, like I don't have that bag, but I was trying to figure out like that was because all of those ones from all the bags that I got from the first time in China, I threw them away or they got lost or something like that. So I don't have them, but I know that I kept track of them in writing. So I know that was the first one that I decided that I was going to keep.
That was the first one ever.
Yeah, that's why I want to talk about it, because that was the first one that I decided like I'm going to start collect. That was the decision making one. I'm going to collect this because I don't understand why. I don't know why I'm collecting this. I don't know why I'm interested in this, but I think it's kind of interesting that this, Italian meat flavor written in Chinese and whatever is here in Wuqiao. And it was just this kind of dissonance that was interesting to me. And then I thought, well, if I keep collecting this, like I'll remember this is my souvenir. I mean, I think I remember thinking that like, this is my souvenir of Wuqiao. It encapsulates my whole like sense of confusion about what's going on here. And then I just kept, then I started collecting them. But the thing is that sometimes I collect them at like in tens, like in England or like in the UK, there's so many potato chip flavors. And sometimes I go to Tesco's or something and there's like 50 bags that I've never seen. So I'll buy all of them.
Do you eat all the chips? Like,
no, I taste them, but if they're gross, I don't eat them. I just throw them away or give them to somebody else.
Do you remember, did you eat the Italian meat flavor?
Yeah. Yeah. I remember that because I wrote it down that it tasted like beef bouillon. I'm basically trying to reconnect with the memory of that and process those, because eventually I'm going to I want to get rid of this collection and I want to feel like I've processed it.
That's nice.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
So that's kind of what it is. Right?
Well, I think we're just living that, right? We don't really know what's going on.
No,
what in the world is going on?
We don't know.
That's it. We just lived it, Anne.
We did.
Job well done.
Yeah, woo! But the Italian meat flavor. Thanks for listening, and if you have any questions or comments about what you heard today, please post them to the review section of your podcast player. So if you use Apple Podcasts, you click on the show thumbnail and scroll down to leave a review. And then whatever happens after that is up to you, but hopefully it's nice. You can also leave posts on Instagram at @MemoryChipsPodcast.